Well, good morning. I'm Linda Peterson, and you might want to know some background about me. I've been a disability advocate all my life. I have worked for the National Council of Churches as contract staff. I have volunteered both at the Minneapolis Synod and church-wide on issues of disability, and I've also worked in the school system through the Minnesota Seeking Educational Equity Through Diversity program. I was on their board. So I hope I know what I'm talking about today. I thought what might be helpful is taking a look at what is in the Old and the New Testament to come up with some ideas of how this congregation, this faith community, could be more inclusive. First of all, would anyone like to define the difference between accessible and inclusive? Any thoughts on that? Yes.
I guess when I think of accessibility, I'm thinking it means you can access, you can get in, but inclusive is that feeling of belonging.
Exactly right. Thank you for sharing that. Yes, you can get in, you can use whatever is in the building here, but inclusion would mean that you're actually a part of it. So that's where we're kind of going to begin. And I've heard Nancy Eislin speak. She's a phenomenal preacher. In her book, The Disabled God Toward a Liberatory Theology of Disability, points out the misconceptions that society has of disability. She calls this the overcomers, and I know this directly from experience. The Overcomers, a generation of disability literature that elevates the individual who conquers disability and achieves success. I don't know if you've ever read Heidi, that novel, but Claire in the city, she's in a wheelchair, she has mobility issues, but as she goes to Heidi's grandfather's farm out in the mountains, all of a sudden she becomes better and overcomes her disability. I tend to think of it as living with a disability. I don't necessarily think you overcome it. Another viewpoint is viewing persons with disabilities as evil. Have you committed a sin, or did your parents commit a sin? And that is something that needs healing, and if you have enough faith, then you would be healed. Recently, this happened to me. There was a gentleman who he noticed that I wore a cross, he noticed I was disabled, and he says, "Are you a Christian?" And I said yes, and he asked me if he could pray for my healing. And that bothered me a lot. I was pretty angry about that and said this conversation needs to end now. I am healed. I may not be cured, but I am healed. There is the medical view of disability, and this is still quite prevalent in our society today, where, quote, the possessor is held for his or her condition, unquote. And again, it needs fixing. In my growing up, I was hospitalized 3 times to fix me. Those stays were at Gillette, where my parents had to give up their parental right. I couldn't just leave. They had to okay it. So I have my thoughts on needing fixing. I'm perfect just as I am. Then there's also the social model. Views disability as a social movement that began as a civil rights movement and has ended with the Americans with Disabilities Act in 1990. It still is not enforced as much as it needs to be. So Nancy Eislin concludes by saying this about disabilities. For persons with disabilities, ordinary lives are lived in unconventional bodies. So disability is a part of life and living. It happens through accident or disease or some genetic dysfunction. So again, it's ordinary lives lived in extraordinary bodies. She also speaks of Jesus on the cross. He becomes disabled. His hands, his feet, his side. It is through that body that, quote, the disabled God promising grace through a broken body is at the center of piety, prayer, practice, and mission. I'll read that again. I think it's so profound. The disabled God promises grace through a broken body is at the center of piety, prayer, practice, and mission. I think about that a lot during this Lenten season here. So she changes the paradigm of the concept of disability. If you have a Bible and would like to read along, the first verse I'm going to turn to is 1 Samuel 16, verse 17. It states, "For the Lord does not see us as mortals do. They look on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks to the heart." So, created in the image of God, Imago Dei, let us keep in mind that God looks into the heart. Another reading is from Ephesians 4, 15, 16. Ephesians 4, 15, 16. But speaking the truth in love, we must grow up in every way into him who is the head, into Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and knit together by every ligament with which it is equipped, as each part is working properly, promotes the body's growth in building itself up in love. So we are inextricably knit together as a faith community, with the head of the body being Christ, as we center on that. But we are to build each other up in love. And some of my favorite passages are in 1 Corinthians, chapter 2. 1 Corinthians chapter 2. Verses 4 through 6. If there are varieties of gifts, but the same Spirit, varieties of service, but the same Lord, varieties of activities, but the same God who activates all of them in everyone. So we do not do disability ministry to or at, we do disability ministry with. All of us have gifts to share, and that is what we are called to do, to find out the gifts, God-given gifts that are in all of us. To continue in Corinthians 1, chapter 2, verses 12 through 26, we get the image of the body and its many parts. For just as the body is one and has many members, and all the members of the body, though many, are one body, so it is with Christ. For in the one Spirit we are all baptized into one body. We were all made to drink of the same Spirit. Indeed, the body does not consist of one member, but of many. If the foot would say, "Because I'm not a hand, I do not belong to that body," that would not make it any less a part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would the hearing be? But as it is, God arranged the members in the body, each one of them as he chose. As it is, there are many members, yet one body. The eye cannot say to the hand, I have no need of you. On the contrary, the members the members of that which seem weaker are indispensable, and our less respectable members are treated with greater respect, whereas our more respectable members do not need this, but God has so arranged the body, giving the greater honor to the inferior member, that there may be no dissension in the body, but the members may have the same care for one another. If one member suffers, all suffer together with it. If one member is honored, all rejoice together. So we each have our part in this body that we call our faith community. So, therefore, we are created in the image of God, who sees our heart. We are called to be not just accessible, but inclusive of all members, building one another up as we live together in the one body with many members. Each members have a gift to share. Each member is indispensable. God's grace is at the center of our practice, prayer, piety, and mission. I just think that's a wonderful way to begin this conversation and look at different stories in the Bible. And I leave with one more quote because I think it's marvelous. In Beyond Accessibility Toward Full Inclusion of Persons with Disabilities by Brett Webb Mitchell, he quotes John Westerhoff of Duke Divinity School. Make way for the image of God. The Imago Dei comes forth. And I think we can see the Imago Dei coming forth in the stories that are found in the Old Testament. Let's see if I can do this right here. All right, we will begin with the story of Moses and then Jacob, and my very favorite is Mephibosheth. That took me about a week to practice saying Mephibosheth. So in Exodus, if you would like to follow along, or you may already know the story of Moses. Exodus 4, verses 10 through 6. But Moses said to the Lord, "Oh, my